Most people think retirement accounts are only about retirement. That is the first mistake. A retirement account is never only a retirement account. It is also a pipeline. It decides who gets access to the stock market, who gets tax advantages, who pays fees, who receives matching money, who becomes an investor, and where long-term capital flows for decades. So when a new retirement account is created, I do not only ask, will this help workers retire? I ask a bigger question, where will the money go? Because in markets, money flows change outcomes. If millions of people who did not have access to a 401k now receive a new government-backed way to invest, that changes the retirement system. But it can also change the stock market, the economy, inflation, and the way ordinary people are pushed into the same system that already made asset owners wealthier. That is why this matters. President Trump has signed an executive order creating what people are calling the Trump IRA. The basic idea is simple. Millions of Americans do not have access to a traditional employer 401k low. Income workers, gig workers, independent workers, Uber drivers, small business employees, and many people outside the corporate benefits system often do not get a retirement plan with an employer match. High-income employees at large companies often have a 401k, a matching contribution, payroll automation, and professional retirement infrastructure built around them. Many lower-income workers have none of that. So the Trump IRA is being presented as a way to give more workers access to retirement investing, lower fees, portability, no meaningful minimums, and a government contribution for people under certain income levels. On the surface, that sounds like a retirement reform, but the deeper story is not only retirement. The deeper story is that the government may be creating another channel to push money into the stock market, while the government itself is already running large deficits and may have to borrow or print more money to fund the match. That is where the simple story becomes a system story, and systems are what matter. Let us start with the 401k. A 401k is a tax-advantaged retirement account tied to an employer. If your company offers one, you can contribute part of your paycheck into it. That money can be invested over 10, 20, 30, or 40 years. It is meant to grow for retirement depending on whether it is traditional or Roth. The tax treatment changes. In a traditional 401k, you put in pre-tax dollars. That means you reduce taxable income today. Your money grows tax-deferred, and you pay taxes later when you withdraw in retirement. In a Roth 401k, you put in money after paying taxes today. Then the money can grow tax-free, and qualified withdrawals later may be tax-free. The concept is powerful because it combines tax advantages, automation, and long-term investing. If the employer also matches contributions, the worker gets additional money simply for participating. That match is one of the most valuable features of the 401k system. But access is uneven. If you work for a company that offers a strong 401k with low-cost funds and a good match, you are inside the machine. Your paycheck can feed the market automatically. Your employer may add money. Your money can compound. If your employer does not offer a 401k, or if you work in the gig economy, or if you change jobs often, you may be outside that machine. That creates a wealth gap, not only a wage gap, a participation gap. People who already have better jobs often get better retirement infrastructure. People with unstable or lower income work may have less access, less automation, and no match. Over decades, that difference compounds. This is one of the reasons the retirement system is so uneven. The 401k is powerful, but it is not universal. According to the source, about 56 million workers in the United States do not have access to a 401k. That is a very large number. It means millions of workers are not just missing a retirement account, they are missing the behavioral structure that pushes people into ownership. That is why a new IRA system matters. The Trump IRA is framed as being available to any worker in the United States. It is not tied to one employer. That means if you change jobs, drive for Uber, work part-time, work for a small business, or move between employers, the account stays with you. Portability is one of the key differences. A 401k often feels connected to the job. A Trump IRA is being described as connected to the worker. That matters because jobs change. People switch employers, businesses fail, workers move, careers are less stable than they used to be. A retirement system tied only to one employer can create friction. Workers may leave accounts behind, they may avoid rollovers, they may feel locked into jobs, they may lose track of old balances, they may be discouraged by complexity. Portability reduces friction, and in personal finance, friction matters. When saving and investing are easy, more people do it. When the process is confusing, fewer people do it. That is not because people are unintelligent, it is because daily life is already full of pressure. If the system requires extra paperwork, rollovers, calls, forms, minimums, decisions, fees, and confusing investment menus, many people simply do nothing. Doing nothing is often not a failure of intelligence. It is a failure of system design. The Trump IRA is being presented as simpler, more accessible, more portable, and cheaper. Now fees, this is the part many people do not understand deeply enough. Fees look small because they are quoted as percentages. 1% does not sound like much, 1.26% does not sound life-changing, but a fee that is charged every year for decades is not small. It compounds against you, according to the source. The average 401k fee in 2025 was around 1.26%. Some funds are much cheaper, some are more expensive, but if the average is around that level, then millions of workers may be paying a significant drag on long-term retirement wealth. The Trump IRA is described as capping fees at 0.15%. That difference is enormous over time. Let us use the example from the source. Imagine a worker invests $500 per month for 30 years and earns an 8% return before fees. Without fees, the account might grow to around $679,000. But if the worker pays the average 401k fee of 1.26%, the account may end closer to $540,000. That means around $139,000 that could have been the worker's retirement wealth went instead to money managers and fees. Now compare that with a 0.15% fee under the same return assumption. The worker may end closer to $660,000, with total fees around $19,000. That is a dramatic difference. The worker did not work harder, the worker did not save more, the worker did not choose a magic investment. The system simply leaked less money. This is why fees matter. Fees are not only costs. Fees are lost compounding. Every dollar paid in fees today is a dollar that cannot compound for 30 years. A high fee account does not just take money once. It takes the future growth of that money too. That is why fee drag is one of the quietest ways wealth is transferred from ordinary investors to financial institutions. Most people do not feel it because the money is not removed in a single dramatic event. It leaves slowly, a little this year, a little next year, a little every year. Then decades later, the difference becomes six figures. That is how hidden systems work. They take small pieces repeatedly until the long-term effect becomes large. This is why low fees can be so valuable. Assuming the investment exposure is broadly similar and the returns are competitive, a low fee does not guarantee success, but a high fee creates a high hurdle. If you are paying more, you should know what you are getting for the price. Most people never ask. They pick the default fund. They trust the plan. They assume the system is working for them. Sometimes it is. Sometimes the system is working very well for the people collecting the fees. That is why every investor should know the expense ratio of the funds they own. Not just in a 401k, in an IRA, a brokerage account, a mutual fund, an ETF, any investment vehicle. If the fee is high, ask whether the performance, service, or strategy truly justifies it. If it does, fine. If it does not, you are donating future wealth. Now, the next feature is minimums. Many retirement systems and investment platforms have minimums or practical barriers. Maybe the account requires $50 a month, maybe $100, maybe the worker believes they need more money to begin. The result is that people who can only start small often do not start at all. The Trump IRA is described as allowing workers to begin with as little as $5. That matters psychologically. $5 is not enough to retire, but $5 is enough to start. And starting matters because the first battle is not always mathematical. It is behavioral. A person who starts investing with $5 begins building identity. They become someone who invests. They see the account. They learn the system. They build the habit over time. That $5 can become 20, then 50, then 100, then more. Small beginnings can become large habits. If the minimum is too high, the habit never forms. This is another reason access matters. A retirement system that only works for people who already have meaningful disposable income excludes the people who may need the habit most. Now, the most politically attractive feature is the government contribution. Because the Trump IRA is not tied to an employer, there is no employer match. But the government is saying that qualifying workers can receive matching money from the government. The source describes a potential government contribution of up to $1,000 per year, not one time, but every year. As long as the worker qualifies, the structure is described as a 50% match up to $1,000. That means to receive the full $1,000, the worker must contribute at least $2,000 over the year. The income thresholds matter according to the source. A single filer making under $20,500 per year could qualify for the full amount. A married filer making under $41,000 could also qualify for the full amount. The benefit phases out after that. Single filers making between $20,500 and $35,500 may still receive some match. Married filers making between $41,000 and $71,000 may still receive some match. Above those levels, the government contribution phases out completely. The logic is clear. The government is trying to provide something like a match for workers who do not have an employer match. If you are a low-income worker and you can contribute $2,000, the government may add $1,000. That is a 50% immediate match before any market return. That is powerful. But this is where we must think very carefully. The most expensive kind of money is often free money. That sounds contradictory, but it is true. When the government gives money, the money must come from somewhere. If the government has a surplus, it can fund the benefit from existing revenue, but the United States government is not operating with a surplus in the source's description. It is already spending more than it brings in. The source gives a rough picture in 2026. The U.S. government is expected to collect around $5 trillion in tax revenue. It is expected to spend around $7 trillion. That creates a gap of about $2 trillion. That gap is the deficit. The government covers the deficit by borrowing. So if a new program adds more spending, the question becomes simple. How is it funded? There are only a few ways. The government can raise taxes, the government can cut other spending, the government can borrow more, or the central bank can support government borrowing by creating money. The source argues that because taxes are being cut, not raised, the most likely path is more debt. And more debt eventually creates pressure for more money creation if private and foreign lenders do not absorb enough government borrowing. That brings us to the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve can create money and use that money to purchase government debt or otherwise support the financial system. The source puts it simply, the Fed can print money out of thin air and lend it to the government through the government bond market. That sounds like a solution, but creating money does not create wealth. This is one of the most important economic principles. You can print dollars, you cannot print houses, you cannot print food, you cannot print energy, you cannot print doctors, you cannot print factories, you cannot print productive capacity. By typing numbers into a system, if more dollars chase the same amount of real goods, services, assets, and labor, then each dollar tends to buy less. That is inflation. It may show up in consumer prices, it may show up in asset prices, it may show up unevenly, but the core mechanism is the same. More claims on the same real economy reduce the value of each claim. So the Trump IRA creates a paradox. It may help low-income workers invest. That is good. It may lower fees. That is good. It may increase access. That is good. It may create portability. That is good. But if the government must borrow or print more money to fund the match, it can also contribute to inflationary pressure. That inflation can hurt the same ordinary people the program is meant to help. This is how government programs often work. The direct benefit is visible. The indirect cost is spread through the system. The worker sees the $1,000 match. The worker does not always see the purchasing power lost when deficits and money creation push inflation through the economy. That is the machine. And if you want to understand economics, you must see both sides, the benefit and the funding source, the match and the debt, the free money and the inflation, the account balance and the purchasing power. A dollar added to a retirement account is not automatically wealth. If the system also weakens the dollar, that does not mean the program is bad in every respect. It means the program has trade-offs, and serious people study trade-offs. Now, the second big system effect is the stock market. The Trump IRA is designed to bring more workers into investing, more accounts, more contributions, more government match, more dollars entering retirement investments. The source estimates that this could bring somewhere between $32 billion and $68 billion of new money into the U.S. stock market. Take that number with caution because the program is new and the actual flows will depend on participation, eligibility, contribution behavior, investment choices, funding rules, and implementation. But the direction is clear. More money could move into the market. Markets are priced by supply and demand. If more buyers come into the stock market and the supply of shares is relatively fixed in the short term, that can push prices higher. The same basic principle applies to houses, gold, crypto, stocks, and many other assets. When there are more buyers than sellers, prices rise. When there are more sellers than buyers, prices fall. So if the Trump IRA creates a new wave of buyers, the stock market may benefit. But here is the deeper point. If the government funds the match with borrowed or printed money, then some of the new stock market demand may come from government created money entering private retirement accounts and then flowing into equities. That is a very important chain. Government creates or borrows money. Government gives matching funds to qualifying workers. Workers invest those funds through Trump IRAs. The money flows into stock funds. Stock demand rises. Asset prices rise. Asset owners benefit. This is how inflationary systems often work. The people closest to assets benefit first. The people living mainly on wages and savings feel the inflation later. This is why asset ownership becomes so important in a world where governments run deficits and create money. If you own assets, inflation may lift asset prices over time. If you hold only cash and wages, inflation may reduce your purchasing power. That is the painful lesson. The government may be trying to help workers become investors, because the system increasingly rewards investors more than savers. But if the same policy also creates more inflation, then the message is clear. You must understand how the system works, or you will be pulled apart by it. One hand gives you a retirement match, the other hand weakens the currency. You need to own assets to survive that kind of system. That is the real story. Now let us compare this to earlier developments. The 401k helped push workers into the stock market through employer plans. Traditional IRAs and Roth IRAs expanded individual retirement investing. Free brokerage platforms made investing easier and brought more retail investors into markets. Now the Trump IRA may create another channel, particularly for workers who are outside the 401k system. Each new channel can increase market participation. Each new channel can increase flows. Each new channel can make the stock market more central to the financial lives of ordinary Americans. This is not a small cultural change. The stock market becomes not just a place for wealthy people, but the default retirement engine for everyone. That has consequences. It can democratize investing. It can also make households more exposed to market volatility. If more people rely on equities for retirement, market downturns become more politically important. Governments may feel more pressure to support markets. Central banks may feel more pressure to stabilize financial conditions. Asset prices become connected to household confidence and retirement security. This creates a feedback loop. More people invested in stocks means more political concern when stocks fall. More political concern may lead to more intervention. More intervention may support asset prices. Support for asset prices may encourage more people to invest. That is the system. It does not mean markets only go up. They do not. Crashes will still happen. Recessions will still happen. Overvaluation will still happen. Bad companies will still fail. Investors will still lose money. But the flows may create a longer-term tailwind for broad market assets, especially if the government is effectively subsidizing contributions into them. That is why financially savvy investors watch these policies, not because they care only about the account itself, because they care about where the money is going. If a large new pool of capital is being directed toward U.S. equities, then U.S. equities may receive more support. The simple way to participate is broad market exposure. The source mentions VTI, a total U.S. stock market ETF, and SPY, which tracks the S&P 500. These are examples of broad U.S. stock market exposure. VTI owns thousands of stocks across the U.S. market. SPY owns the 500 largest companies in the S&P 500. The point is not that every person should buy those exact funds. The point is that if the system is pushing more money into the American stock market, a broad exposure vehicle can allow an investor to own where the money is flowing. That is a system's way to think. You do not have to guess every single company. You can own the broad channel receiving flows. But again, there are risks. Markets do not move in straight lines. More money entering the market can raise valuations and increase volatility. Free money can create speculation. More access can bring in inexperienced investors. Retail investors may buy at the wrong times. Government-driven flows can inflate prices beyond fundamentals. When conditions reverse, the drawdowns can be larger. Anytime a system adds liquidity and access, it can create both upside and instability. That is why more buyers does not mean no crashes. It may mean bigger booms and bigger busts. This is important. People often misunderstand liquidity. They think more money means safety. It does not. More money can push prices up, but if prices rise faster than fundamentals, the system becomes more fragile. When sentiment turns, the fall can be severe. That is why the stock market can benefit from new flows while still becoming more volatile. Both can be true. A good investor holds multiple truths at once. Now let us return to the retirement worker. For a low-income worker, the Trump IRA could be valuable if it truly offers low fees, accessibility, portability, no meaningful minimums, and government matching money. A 50% match up to $1,000 is powerful if the worker can contribute enough to receive it. But the worker must also understand that investing involves risk. The account can go down, stocks can crash, broad funds can lose value. The worker should not invest money needed for rent, food, medical bills, or emergency cash. Retirement accounts are long-term tools. They are not short-term safety funds. This is especially important for lower-income workers because they often have less room for error. A market decline that is tolerable for a wealthy person may feel terrifying for someone with no emergency fund, so the right order still matters. Emergency cash, high-interest debt control, basic stability, then investing for retirement. If the government provides a match, that match may make investing more attractive, but the household still needs liquidity. An account cannot help you survive an emergency if it is locked, volatile, or penalized for early withdrawal. Access to investing is good, but investing without financial stability can become stressful. This is another trade-off. Now, fees should be understood by everyone, not just people using the Trump IRA. If you have a 401k, look at the expense ratios. If you own mutual funds, look at the expense ratios. If you have an IRA, look at the expense ratios. If you own ETFs, look at the expense ratios. If your advisor charges a fee, understand the advisor fee and the fund fees beneath it. A fee is not always bad. Sometimes a service, strategy, or planning relationship is worth paying for. But you must know what you are paying and what you receive in exchange. If a high-fee fund performs no better than a low-cost index fund, the fee is a drag. If a high-fee advisor gives no planning value, no tax strategy, no behavioral coaching, and no superior results, the The fee may be a leak. Leaks matter. A small leak in a boat can sink it over a long journey. A small fee can sink a large portion of future wealth over 30 years. This is one of the clearest lessons from the 401k comparison. The difference between 1.26% and 0.15% can be huge over time. If people understand only one thing from this policy debate, let it be that low fees can change retirement outcomes. Now, let us talk about portability. A worker leaving one job for another often must decide what to do with an old 401k. Leave it with the old employer, roll it into a new employer plan, roll it into an IRA, cash it out, which is often a terrible idea because of taxes and penalties. Many people do nothing because the process is confusing. Over a lifetime, workers may collect several old plans. Some accounts are forgotten, some sit in high-fee plans, some are invested poorly, some are cashed out during transitions. Portability reduces that problem. A portable account follows the worker. It can reduce friction, reduce forgotten accounts, and make retirement saving feel less tied to employer stability. This matters especially in a labor market where people switch jobs more often. Retirement structure must fit modern work. If work is portable, retirement accounts should be portable too. That is the good side of the Trump IRA concept. But every good idea must still be funded. That brings us back to the deficit. The government is already running a large gap between spending and revenue. If a household earns $5 and spends $7, it must borrow $2. If it keeps doing that, debt grows eventually. Interest costs rise, creditors demand more, the household becomes fragile. Governments are different because they can tax and issue currency, but the basic principle remains. Spending beyond revenue creates obligations. Obligations must be financed. Financing through debt creates future claims. Financing through money creation creates inflation pressure. There is no free lunch. The government can give a worker $1,000, but the system must absorb the cost somewhere. That cost may be future taxes, it may be more debt, it may be inflation, it may be lower purchasing power, it may be higher interest payments, it may be paid by future generations. The match is visible. The cost is diffuse. This is why free money is expensive. People like the visible benefit and ignore the diffuse cost, but markets do not ignore the cost forever. Now, does this mean a worker should refuse the match if they qualify? Not necessarily. If the government is offering a match and the worker can responsibly contribute, it may be rational to accept it. Refusing the match does not necessarily stop the deficit. It may only mean the worker misses a benefit others receive. This is similar to an employer match. If your employer offers a 401k match, not taking it is often leaving compensation on the table. With a government match, the personal decision and the macro policy are different questions. Personally, the match may be valuable. Systemically, it may increase debt and inflation risk. A person can accept the benefit while still understanding the cost. That is the mature view. The immature view is to see only the free money. The cynical view is to reject everything. The balanced view is to understand both. Now, what should an investor do with this information? First, understand that more retirement access can create long-term stock market flows. Second, understand that government-funded contributions can be inflationary if funded through debt and money creation. Third, understand that inflation tends to hurt savers and wage earners while benefiting owners of assets. Fourth, understand that market flows can support equities but also increase volatility. Fifth, understand that broad market exposure may be a simple way to participate in the system receiving new flows. Sixth, understand that low fees are essential. Seventh, understand that no government program removes the need for personal discipline. That is the framework. If the Trump IRA begins in 2027 as scheduled in the source, the effect will not necessarily be immediate in one day. Retirement flows build over time. Workers contribute monthly. Government matches are credited according to rules. Assets accumulate. Fund managers receive money index. Funds buy stocks. The effect compounds. This is how retirement systems move markets, not with one dramatic event, with repeated flows. Every paycheck, every contribution, every match, every month, every year. That slow flow can become powerful because it is persistent. Persistent flows are one of the strongest forces in markets. They do not need to be exciting, they need to be steady. This is why the 401k system became so important. Automatic payroll contributions pushed money into markets for decades. The Trump IRA could create another version of that flow for people outside the old system. That is why investors should not dismiss it. Now, let us talk about volatility. The source makes an important point. More money and more access do not eliminate crashes. They can sometimes amplify them. When more inexperienced investors enter markets, sentiment can swing more violently. Free money can create overconfidence. Rising prices attract more buyers. Then falling prices scare the same buyers away. That can create bigger moves. So if this policy helps stocks, it may also make the cycle more intense. Booms can get bigger, busts can get bigger, but busts create opportunity for investors who understand the system. Market crashes and recessions often create more millionaires than calm periods because great assets can be bought at lower prices. That is not because crashes are pleasant, they are painful. People lose money, businesses fail, jobs are lost, fear rises. But for investors with cash, discipline, and long-time horizons, crashes can reset valuations. This is why financially savvy investors do not only celebrate rising markets, they prepare for falling markets. If new retirement flows support markets over time, but volatility creates crashes along the way, the strategy may be to own broad assets and also maintain cash or dry powder for drawdowns. That is a more complete plan. Do not simply buy because money is flowing in. Buy with an understanding that markets still cycle. The best opportunities often appear when the crowd panics. Now let us consider the political meaning. A government that creates a retirement account connected to stock market investment is effectively encouraging households to become asset owners. That may be positive, but it also ties household confidence more directly to market performance. If retirement security depends more on asset prices, then policymakers may feel pressure to support those asset prices. This creates an asset-based economy. In an asset-based economy, people who own assets are rewarded when liquidity expands. People who do not own assets fall behind. The solution offered by the government is often to help more people become owners of financial assets. That can help some people. But if the same government continues policies that inflate asset prices faster than wages, the gap may persist or even widen. Why? Because the person who already owns a large portfolio benefits far more from asset inflation than the worker who just started with $5. A rising stock market helps both, but not equally. If a wealthy investor owns $1 million in stocks and the market rises 10%, that is $100,000. If a new worker owns $500 and the market rises 10%, that is $50. Both gain 10%. The dollar difference is enormous. So giving workers access is good, but it does not fully solve the asset gap. It gives them a ladder. But others are already much higher up the ladder. This is why the earlier you become an owner, the better. Waiting makes the gap harder to close. That is the practical lesson. Do not wait for the perfect program. If you have access to a 401k, IRA, Roth IRA, brokerage account, or any low-cost investment vehicle, start learning now. Use the tools available. If the Trump IRA becomes available and you qualify, understand it, but do not let policy headlines delay personal action. The system rewards action. Now let us discuss the government contribution again. A 50% match is powerful, but the worker must contribute. If a worker earns under the threshold but cannot afford to contribute $2,000, they may not receive the full $1,000 match. That is an important limitation. Low-income workers may be eligible for the most help, but least able to contribute enough to capture it. This is always a problem with matching systems. A match rewards people who can save. It does less for people who cannot create the savings gap. So the Trump IRA may help the low-income worker who has some ability to save. It may not fully help the worker living paycheck to paycheck with no available cash. That worker still needs higher income, lower expenses, debt relief, emergency savings, or other support before investing becomes practical. Again, access is necessary but not sufficient. A door helps only if people can walk through it. The match helps only if the worker can contribute. This is another trade-off. Now, what about the claim that the Trump IRA replaces the 401k? I would be careful with that language. It may not replace the 401k for people who already have strong employer plans. A good 401k with a generous employer match can still be extremely powerful. High-income workers may not qualify for the government match. Employer plans may allow higher contribution limits. Some 401ks have excellent low-cost funds. The Trump IRA may be an additional channel, especially for those without access, rather than a complete replacement for every worker. But the political message is strong. The 401k system has flaws. Access is uneven. Fees can be high. Portability can be poor. Minimums can discourage small savers. Employer match is not universal. The Trump IRA is an attempt to address those flaws. Whether it succeeds depends on details. Implementation matters. Rules matter. Investment options matter. Fees matter. Administrative quality matters. Participation matters. Funding matters. A good concept can fail if the execution is poor. A flawed concept can still create large market effects if money flows are significant. That is why we watch the details. Now, let us talk about the $32 to $68 billion flow estimate. In the context of the entire U.S. stock market, that number is not enormous by itself. The U.S. equity market is worth many trillions, but flows matter when they are persistent and politically supported. If the program grows, if participation rises, if government matches continue, and if contributions repeat annually, the long-term impact can be meaningful. Also, the psychological impact can exceed the first-year dollar amount. If workers who never invested begin seeing themselves as investors, their future behavior may change. They may contribute more. They may open other accounts. They may learn about stocks. They may become more comfortable owning index funds. They may participate in markets for decades. The long-term cultural effect may matter as much as the first-year flow. This is how financial systems change. First access, then habit, then identity, then capital formation. The Trump IRA could help create that sequence for some workers. But again, if the funding side is inflationary, the system creates winners and losers at the same time. Now, let us talk about the phrase printing money directly into the stock market. Technically, the chain may be indirect. The government borrows or the Fed supports the bond market. The government funds the match. Workers invest through accounts. Funds buy stocks. But economically, the effect can feel like government-created money supporting asset demand. That is why the source describes it so strongly. The point is not that a printing press buys stocks directly in every case. The point is that new government spending funded through debt and possible money creation can become new demand for equities through retirement accounts. That is the important mechanism. Money creation raises asset prices when it enters asset markets. That has been one of the defining patterns of the modern economy. Liquidity flows somewhere. If it flows into stocks, stock prices can rise. If it flows into housing, home prices can rise. If it flows into crypto, crypto can rise. If it flows into consumer spending, consumer prices can rise. If it flows into all of them, you get a broad inflation of financial and real assets. This is why investors care about liquidity. Liquidity is the oxygen of asset markets. Now, how should someone think like an investor in this environment? First, own assets rather than relying only on cash. Second, prefer low-cost, diversified exposure unless you have real skill in selecting individual assets. Third, understand tax, advantaged accounts and use them where appropriate. Fourth, take free matches when they are rational and affordable. Fifth, do not overpay fees. Sixth, keep emergency liquidity. Seventh, recognize that government spending and money creation can support asset prices but weaken currency purchasing power. Eighth, prepare for volatility because liquidity-driven markets can swing hard. Ninth, use downturns as opportunities if your personal finances are strong. That is the practical framework. Now, let us address the worker who may qualify. If you qualify for the Trump IRA match and the program is implemented as described, the first question is whether you can contribute enough to receive the match without endangering your short-term life. If you can contribute $2,000 over the year, that is roughly $167 per month. The government may add up to $1,000. That is meaningful. If you cannot contribute $167 per month, maybe you start with $5, $20, $50. You may not get the full match, but you begin. The habit matters. Then look at fees. If the fee cap is truly 0.15%, that is attractive. But you still need to understand investment options. Are they broad index funds, target date funds, stable value funds, bond funds, equity funds? What is the default? What is the risk? What happens if markets fall? Can you choose properly? A low fee bad allocation can still be wrong. A low fee good allocation can be powerful. Fees matter, but allocation matters too. Now, for someone with an existing 401k, the question is different. If your employer offers a match, capture it if you can. Employer match is valuable. If your plan has high fees, look for the lowest cost broad funds available. If your plan has terrible options, contribute enough to get the match and then consider IRA options if eligible. If you leave the job, think carefully about rollovers. Do not cash out unless you fully understand the tax and penalty consequences. The Trump IRA may not be your main tool if your 401k is strong, but it may still affect the broader market you invest in. That is why even high-income investors should pay attention. You may not receive the benefit, but the policy may influence asset flows and inflation. Now, let us talk about inflation again because it is the hidden tax. If the government prints or borrows more to fund spending and the productive economy does not grow at the same pace, the purchasing power of money can fall. Prices rise, wages may lag, savings lose value. People holding cash feel poorer. People owning assets may see nominal wealth rise. This is the great divide. Savers of currency lose. Owners of productive assets may win. That does not mean every asset always wins. It means in an inflationary system, holding only cash is dangerous over long periods. This is why understanding the Trump IRA is not just about retirement accounts. It is about understanding that the system is increasingly designed to push people into assets because the currency itself loses value. If you are not an owner, inflation can erode you. If you are an owner, inflation may partially lift your assets, but if you become an owner too late, you may pay inflated prices. That is why education matters. The goal is not to blindly buy. The goal is to understand flows, value, risk, and time. Now, what could go wrong with the Trump IRA as a policy? Participation may be low. Workers may not contribute enough to capture the match. Administrative complexity may create friction. Fees may be capped, but hidden costs may appear elsewhere. Investment options may be limited or poorly understood. Markets may be overvalued when the money flows in. Government debt may rise. Inflation may increase. Political changes may alter the program. The estimated inflows may be wrong. The match may be changed or reduced. Workers may withdraw early if allowed and face penalties or taxes. There are many risks. A new account does not automatically create good outcomes. Good outcomes require good design and good behavior. Now, what could go right? Millions of workers without 401ks could begin investing. Low fees could preserve more retirement wealth. Portability could reduce forgotten accounts. Small minimums could help new savers start. Government matching could encourage contributions. Long-term flows could increase asset ownership. Workers who are outside the market could begin building wealth. If implemented well, that is meaningful. Again, good and bad can coexist. A program can help individuals while creating macro costs. A program can increase access while increasing inflation risk. A program can support markets while increasing volatility. You must be able to see the full picture. Now, let us think about the stock market opportunity. If new retirement money flows into broad U.S. equities, then owning broad U.S. equities may benefit. Funds like total market ETFs or SP 500 ETFs are simple ways to capture that. They do not require choosing the individual winner. They own the system receiving the money. But price matters. Valuation matters. If everyone piles into the market at high prices, future returns can be lower. This is why dollar cost averaging and long-term discipline matter. Do not put all money in because of one policy headline. Build a plan, invest consistently. Keep reserves. Use downturns. The existence of new flows is a tailwind, not a guarantee. A tailwind helps. It does not eliminate storms. Now let us talk about investors becoming richer from inflation. This is a sensitive point, but it is true in many cases. When money is created, it often enters through financial channels. Asset prices rise before wages adjust. The person who owns stocks, real estate, businesses, gold, or other assets may see nominal wealth increase. The person with only wages and savings sees costs rise. This creates resentment because the system appears unfair. It is unfair in many ways, but understanding it is more useful than only resenting it. If the system rewards owners, become an owner. If the system punishes cash, do not hold only cash. If the system creates inflation, own things that can adjust to inflation. If the system directs retirement money into stocks, understand stock ownership. That is not an ideological statement. It is survival inside the machine. Now, let us return to the phrase, Trump quietly replaced the 401k. The 401k is not disappearing, but the meaning of retirement investing may be changing. For decades, the 401k was the main workplace retirement engine. It was tied to employment. Employer matches, plan menus, fees, and rollover friction. The Trump IRA idea tries to create a parallel engine that is more universal, government-linked, portable, low fee and match, supported for lower-income workers. If that works, the retirement system becomes less employer-centric and more government account-centric. That is a major shift. It also means the government becomes more directly involved in pushing households into market investing. That has consequences. When the government encourages stock ownership, it also becomes more politically exposed to stock market outcomes. If markets crash, voters suffer. If voters suffer, politicians respond. This can increase pressure for future interventions. This is how financialization grows. The more retirement security depends on markets, the more markets become politically important. That is not necessarily good or bad. It is reality. Now let us talk about how this can change behavior. A worker who never invested may begin with $5. Then the government match may make $2,000 per year feel worth trying. Then the worker sees money grow. Then the worker learns about index funds. Then the worker begins understanding fees. Then the worker opens another account. Then the worker becomes an asset owner. That is a positive pathway. But another worker may contribute, see the market fall, panic, stop contributing, or withdraw early if possible. That is the negative pathway. The same account can produce different outcomes depending on behavior. This is why financial education matters as much as account access. Opening an account is not enough. People need to understand volatility, fees, diversification, time horizon, inflation, taxes, and behavior. Otherwise, they may use the tool poorly. A tool without education can disappoint. A tool with education can compound. Now, what would I tell a worker considering it? If the program exists and you qualify, understand the match, understand the fee, understand the investment options, understand the withdrawal rules, understand whether the account is traditional or Roth, or what tax treatment applies, understand how it fits with your emergency fund, debt, and other retirement accounts. Then contribute only what you can sustain. Consistency matters more than enthusiasm. Do not contribute for 3 months and quit because the market fell. Do not choose high-risk investments because the account is small and you want it to grow fast. Do not ignore the match if you can safely capture it. Do not let inflation keep you outside ownership. Start intelligently. Now, what would I tell an investor watching the macro effect? Follow the flows. If $32 to $68 billion of new money begins moving into the U.S. stock market, that is a signal. It may support broad index funds, large cap equities, and the overall asset ownership system. But do not forget the funding mechanism. If the money is funded through debt and money creation, inflationary pressure may support assets nominally while weakening real purchasing power. So the opportunity is not only stocks, it is understanding that in a world of deficits and money creation, cash is a weak long-term store of value. Stocks may benefit, real assets may benefit, businesses may benefit, but volatility will remain. A balanced investor prepares for both asset inflation and market drawdowns. Now, let us think about the broader American economy. The government is already borrowing heavily. If it adds new programs without cutting elsewhere, debt rises. Debt service becomes a bigger part of the budget. If interest rates stay high, the cost of debt becomes more painful. If the Fed supports the government, the money supply can expand. If money expands faster than goods and services, inflation can appear at the same time. The stock market may rise because more money flows into it, so ordinary people may see a strange combination. Their retirement account may rise, but groceries, rent, insurance, and everyday costs may also rise. They may feel richer on paper and poorer in daily life. That is the inflationary asset economy. It creates nominal wealth and real pressure at the same time. This is why measuring only account balances can mislead you. You must measure purchasing power. If your portfolio rises 8%, but your cost of living rises 10%, you did not become richer in real terms. If your wages rise 4%, but inflation is higher, you are behind. If your retirement account grows because money printing lifts asset prices, but the dollar buys less, you need to think in real terms. Real wealth is what your money can buy, not the number alone. Now let us connect fees and inflation. Fees reduce your account balance. Inflation reduces your purchasing power together. They can quietly destroy retirement. A high fee account in an inflationary environment is a double leak. The account loses potential growth to fees, and the dollars left inside may buy less over time. That is why low fees and real asset ownership matter. You need more of the return to stay with you, and you need assets that can grow faster than the currency loses value. That is the real purpose of investing, not just more dollars, more purchasing power. Now, the 401k system already showed the power of automatic flows. The Trump IRA may extend that logic to people outside traditional employment benefits. If that happens, it could increase participation and create a new base of long-term buyers. But if participants are not educated, the same system can create disappointments. A person who buys at highs and sells at lows will not be saved by a low-fee account. A person who contributes consistently for decades may benefit enormously. Behavior is the bridge between policy and outcome. The government can create the account. It cannot force discipline. That is your job. Now let us talk about recessions. Even if the Trump IRA sends more money into the stock market, recessions will still happen. Corporate profits can fall. Unemployment can rise. Consumers can pull back. Credit can tighten. Markets can decline. Government programs cannot eliminate the business cycle. In fact, if excess liquidity pushes valuations higher, the eventual corrections may feel sharper. This is why people must not interpret new flows as a guarantee. Markets are not guaranteed. Stocks can lose money. Broad funds can decline. If you are using retirement accounts, your time horizon must be long enough to tolerate drawdowns. A person near retirement must think differently from a 25-year-old. The account is only a container. The allocation must match the person. Now, let us talk about the role of low-cost broad funds. For many people, the simplest exposure to the stock market is through broad index funds. VTI gives total U.S. market exposure. SPY gives SP 500 exposure. Similar funds exist from many providers. The advantage is diversification. You are not trying to pick one winner. You are owning a broad slice of American business. If the policy directs money into the American stock market broadly, broad funds may participate, but diversification does not remove market risk. It removes company-specific risk. That distinction matters. If the whole market falls, the broad fund falls too. You must be prepared. Now, the deeper lesson is that retirement policy can become market policy. When the government changes retirement accounts, it changes capital flows. When it changes capital flows, it changes asset demand. When it changes asset demand, it changes prices. When prices change, wealth changes. When wealth changes, politics changes. This is why I do not separate retirement from macroeconomics. They are connected. The individual sees an account, the system sees a capital pipeline. The individual sees a match, the system sees government spending. The individual sees low fees, the system sees lower leakage and more compounding for households. The individual sees access, the system sees millions of new buyers. The individual sees free money, the system sees debt, money creation, and inflation pressure. You must learn to see both levels. That is the Dalio way of thinking. Look at the machine. What are the inputs? What are the outputs? Who pays? Who benefits? What incentives are created? What happens if the policy succeeds? What happens if it fails? What happens in first order? What happens in second order? Most people stop at the first order. They hear the government will give workers free money to invest, and they stop. A serious investor keeps going. Where does the money come from? What does it do to deficits? What does it do to inflation? Where does the invested money flow? What does it do to stocks? What does it do to volatility? Who benefits most? Who gets hurt? How should I position? That is the real analysis. Now let us close the argument. The Trump IRA may be sold as a new retirement tool for Americans who do not have 401ks. That is true on the surface. It may increase access. It may lower fees. It may be portable. It may allow tiny contributions. It may provide government matching money for lower income workers. Those are meaningful features, but underneath that, it is also another mechanism to send money into the stock market. And because the government is already running large deficits, that money may be funded through more debt and possibly more money creation. That can create inflation. Inflation hurts people who rely only on wages and cash. At the same time, the new money flowing into markets can support asset prices and benefit investors. So the lesson is not only use the account. The lesson is understand the system. If you qualify and can responsibly contribute, the match may be valuable. If you already invest, watch the flows. If you hold cash, understand inflation risk. If you pay fees, understand fee drag. If you fear market volatility, understand that crashes are part of the system and can create opportunity. If you want to win in this economy, you need to own assets, control costs, keep discipline, and think in real purchasing power. That is the core. The Trump IRA may change retirement access, but the bigger truth is that America is building more and more pathways that push ordinary people into markets, because the old promise of simply saving cash and retiring comfortably has become weaker. Cash loses value. Fees eat returns. Jobs do not always offer benefits. Government deficits grow. Money is printed. Assets inflate. Workers without assets fall behind. So the system is pushing them toward ownership that can be good, but only if they understand what they are entering. The stock market is not a magic machine. It is a volatile ownership system. It rewards patience, discipline, low fees, and long time horizons. It punishes panic, ignorance, high fees, and short-term thinking. A Trump IRA may open the door, but the account will not walk through the door for you. You still have to contribute. You still have to choose wisely. You still have to tolerate downturns. You still have to understand inflation. You still have to keep fees low. You still have to think like an investor. That is the final point in the new economy. The difference between people who understand money and people who do not is growing wider. The government can create accounts. The Fed can create dollars. Wall Street can create funds. Politicians can create promises. But real wealth still comes down to understanding the machine and positioning yourself on the right side of it. The Trump IRA may be one more sign of where the machine is going: more debt, more money creation, more stock market flows, more asset inflation, more volatility, more need for ordinary workers to become owners. If you understand that early, you can use the system. If you do not, the system will use you. That is why this matters far beyond retirement. It is not only about a new IRA, it is about the way America is trying to solve a retirement crisis by pushing more people into the same asset market that has already become the main engine of wealth in the country. And if that is the direction of the machine, then the most dangerous thing you can do is remain only a worker, only a saver, and only a holder of dollars that lose value over time. You must become an owner, but you must become one intelligently: low fees, long horizon, broad exposure, emergency cash, controlled risk, understanding of inflation, and the discipline to keep buying when the system shakes. That is how you turn a government program into personal strategy. Not by believing in free money, by understanding what free money really costs, where it flows, and how to position yourself before the next wave of capital changes the market again.